Jessie.
And I'm Tyler.
And we're here to talk to you today about what universities are like in the United States and in Germany. We're both Americans. We did our bachelor's degrees in California.
So for instance, I went to community college first, and then for my bachelor's I went to the UCI, so UC Irvine, and then summarily we both actually did a study abroad here at the Free University Berlin in Germany.
And that's where we met, was when we were both studying abroad at Germany.
I would say, but now, things have changed. We're now in graduate school. Jessie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing here?
First off, I did my bachelor's in history and international relations, and now I'm getting my master's in Germany in global history. My program is it's a joint program between two different universities here in Berlin. And the language for my program is English. All of my classes are taught in English, which is a really nice benefit of studying in Germany. Not all countries would have that. So first off, I think one of the biggest differences that I've seen in universities in Germany is just like the style of like how classes are taught. First off, professors don't teach the same class year after year. They can just teach based off of what their current research is. So at least in the history world. I don't know what it's like for chemistry.
Yeah, so I study chemistry and I'm in the doctoral program here right now. And what happens a lot of times is the same classes have to be taught because the chemical knowledge doesn't really change. But a lot of the times what happens is there's a switch between the professors. So a lot of times the professors will go and switch what they're teaching within their own subject. Or, for instance, you have a new habilitation student, somebody who wants to become a professor.
My classes have been taught by professors so far. And all the classes are seminars, so super discussion based, and the professor will maybe just ask a few leading questions, but there's been no lectures. And I think in the States, at least, there was a lot of lectures for me.
Well, maybe you can go and talk about how long these seminars last, because I know from my perspective in the States, you have typically semesters, and in the semester you have very regular, you meet once or twice a week for 1 to 2 hours. Maybe you could go and discuss your own feeling with the seminar, especially block seminars.
Most of our seminars just meet once a week, usually for 2 hours. I've only had one experience with a block seminar where we met 5 times total for the whole semester, and each meeting time was 7 hours long. So it was quite intensive, but it was really nice. It afforded us the opportunity to really dig in deep with primary materials, which you couldn't really do in a normal seminar setting, which is normally we read academic articles at home and then come to class prepared to discuss what these authors were saying.
Okay. And there's a lot of discussion that goes on, it's very involved. Do you feel that the students are just as motivated here in Germany compared to the States, or is there a bit of, students are students no matter where you go?
That's what I was going to say. I think students are students. I don't think that there's a difference in motivation. I do think there's a different level of having to be prepared when you have to come to class to discuss. You're supposed to have done the learning at home already, but in the States, if it's a lecture style class, then you come to class to learn, and you just have to take notes. But here, I feel like you have to really be on your game and ready to. The Germans are really good at having discussions and debates. I think they really enjoy that.
Okay.
So I think they can be quite vocal in classes, which is different to what I experienced in the States, at least. I don't know what your classes are like. Do you have
luckily,
normal classes like me, or do you just have experiments?
Well, normal classes like you. I see. I think my classes are also very normal. But I would say there's not a lot of debate in chemistry in general. It's definitely a lot of, you're given a lot of information about how different chemicals and molecules work, how they come together and bond. And I would say that the big discussion point is more about asking questions on how something works.
Yeah.
And I, as a doctor student, I have to teach some of the basic laboratory classes for the very first semester students. And here I can really think back to my very first semesters in chemistry, from my own personal experience.
Not knowing anything.
Not knowing anything and seeing what happens. And now every day I'm going into lab, and then I have my students that I have to watch out for, and I'm like, oh, please don't burn it, or please don't touch something disgusting. And so it's a lot of, I would say the big point for me is to really try to make sure that my students have an understanding of what's going on before they enter the laboratory, because a lot of them don't read the assignment beforehand. And I think with the United States, where I was in my community college and my at the university, there was a lot of emphasis on you get the laboratory assignment a week beforehand, and you then have to write out at least the preparation of how you do the assignment in your lab journal, so that the lab assistant can look over it, the lab TA can look over it and say, well, you've obviously read your assignment, you know what you're supposed to be doing. And here it's a bit different, where it feels like there's a lot more responsibility on the teacher to make sure that the student has seen it one time before they go into lab.
So in a way, students in the States are more prepared for the lab?
I think they're forced to be more prepared, not because they want to be more prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it were up to me in the States, I would have also not have done anything beforehand. I would have just sat.
Students are students.
Yeah,
So.
There you go.
And what do you feel like? I think, like your example just now with the lab, it just shows how much in the States, I think the university system really supports the student, forces them to do things. I think there's a lot more busy work.
Yeah. Homework, I think, is more prevalent in the States than here, where it's like you get 10 points on this assignment, and I feel like there's this incentive of, oh, I have to get every last point.
Yeah.
And here, I just don't have that feeling.
There's not a lot of, we have nothing to do. I feel like in the States I was constantly writing essays and taking midterms and stuff, and I feel like here nothing like that exists. There's no busy work I have to keep on top of, but then I felt like that busy work, annoying as it is, it also like helps you, with your learning. Keeps you on track, because I feel like here it's all up to the student, to the individual, like how much effort they want to put in and how much they're going to get out of their studies.
Yeah, well, I think that's very true. And I think looking at one of the points you brought up is midterms. I have never had a midterm here. I think the amount of preparation that you do to get ready for the midterm is quite good in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then you feel such a relief when you're finished with it. You finished half the course, you have like a pre-grade to sort of see where you're going. In Germany, it's just everything is at the end.
Yeah.
Period. And I think the other thing that I noticed was that you have here in Germany the chance to retake your exam if you've actually failed it. So this is something that's a little bit different.
I think that's nice, yeah. That doesn't really exist in the States.
No.
It's like if you fail, you fail. Like, yeah.
It's all or nothing.
Yeah. But in general, how do you feel the feedback is here in Germany?
What do you between
So-
student and professor?
Yeah, between the
or-
student and professor, like you can retake your exams, but are they
Mhm.
telling you which sections you failed, or in my masters, a lot of students, we have to write these big research papers, and people turn in their research papers, and then months and months and months go by, and you don't get a grade. And if you do get a grade, eventually there's often not a lot of feedback,
Mhm.
so you don't really know how to improve your writing and your research
Okay.
for your next paper.
Well, I think that's maybe a difference between the hard sciences and the humanities now, because we have pen and paper tests that you sit in there for 2 to 3 hours,
Yeah, that doesn't exist for me.
and you fill in questions, and there is a very solid answer to that question
Yeah.
with some variation, some wiggle room, and the help that I found. So you have in the States, you go and you have typically a phase where you have to finish, the grades have to be submitted by the end of the semester period, and the end of the semester occurs about a week after you take your exam. This means that your professors are super quick on grading it and getting you the grade back. And for me personally, I never really cared about looking at the grade afterwards because I knew the grade and it was over. And I felt like there was nothing really offered from the professor's side to say, if you want to look at it, here's an appointment where we look at it. Whereas in the sciences over here, we definitely have appointments afterwards where we say, come over on this date and we will look at the exam together. I will go through the questions with you if you have a problem.
That's so nice.
Yeah, and it's really good. And this, of course, leads to another problem, that you don't actually have to turn in the grades until the semester ends in Germany, which you might think, well, this isn't a big problem, you know, you take the exam a week before the end of the semester if you're looking from the American perspective, but it's not so in the German perspective. In the German perspective, the students take their exam like a month and a half, 2 months before the end of the semester in the hard sciences.
Really?
Yeah, because this is normally the time it takes for everybody to write these essays and Hausarbeit in German, in the German university. And with chemistry, math, physics, you just take the exam like a month and a half, 2 months before you're finished with it. You have a boatload of time to take vacation. So the students are sending out mails saying, hey, could you tell us our grade? We want to go on vacation. We want to know if we want to study or not. So it's this constant, do I think I failed? Do I think I passed? I have to put in a lot more effort during my vacation than I want to.
Yeah.
Whereas in the States, it's very final and
Yeah.
very immediate.
Like, you have your grade right away, and then you can go be sad or be happy during your vacation.
Exactly.
But it's your vacation.
Yeah, and I think this brings me maybe to a thing where we have in common, actually, between humanities and sciences, is that when the professors are allowed so much time to sit around and not correct things, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the professor to say, I'd prefer not to do the work right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the deadlines don't really exist. Some of the professors in my program just say, turn in the paper when you want to. It could be a year from now if you want. A few of them are quite hard with the deadline, but in general, it's much more relaxed than in the States. But also, touching on the whole vacation thing, here in Germany, students are expected to write research papers during their vacation. The papers are usually due the last day of the vacation period. So you have your whole vacation to write it, which is nice, but you also have your whole vacation to worry about it and procrastinate, which I think doesn't give the brain the full break that I think is necessary sometimes. Like, if you're gonna go on vacation, I don't want to be worried about something, but here you're always stressed about a paper, I think.
I think so. I think there are a very limited few people that go into their vacation fully without a care in the world. I think.
And those people are impressive students.
Well, they're either really impressive students or they're really bad students
Yeah.
because they just didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, you know, most people, they get it done at the end of the day, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, what made you choose to do grad school in Germany versus the States?
Well, there were several reasons. I would say the primary factor was the financial factor.
But what I also really liked was, I noticed this when we were studying abroad here, I felt like students had, especially in the bachelor's level, more control over what their own personal research interests in their papers. Like in the States, if you're writing a paper in the humanities at a bachelor's level, your professor just gives you a prompt and you have to answer that. So
Okay.
there's no leeway in you researching and learning more about like your own personal interests, whereas here you take the class and then you propose to the professor what you want to write about. So you can write about your interests as long as they somehow relate to the class, which I really liked, and that was always in the back of my mind, and I wanted to come back to Germany because of that.
And it's been the same for you then for the masters as well?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and as well as for courses, I feel, do you also have more freedom in picking and choosing courses than you did in the States?
In the States, at least in the humanities, I had a lot of freedom. It was just sort of take a certain amount of classes, and here it's basically the same thing.
Okay.
We just have to have a regional focus. But it's fairly flexible. Yeah. I don't know. I guess with chemistry, you have to build up knowledge.
Well, yeah, you have to build up some knowledge, but I would say that there's also a bit more flexibility for the bachelor students in chemistry in Germany.
Okay.
The reason for this being that the schooling system is built a little differently here, and you have general education in the United States, so you have essentially 2 years of general courses, and then you go straight into your discipline. And so you save a little bit of time actually when you come to Germany for a bachelor's. You have 3 years instead of the 4 years that are typical.
Yeah, because you skip the general education and go straight into what your degree is actually about.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen this, and it's been quite nice for a lot of students, but I have to say, if I'm being quite honest about it, general education is a really good thing to have.
I agree, I really like it.
I think it's really nice, not only because you get to see what other people are doing, but sometimes after your first semester or two, you realize this isn't so nice. This isn't what I want to study.
Yeah.
And I've seen this in my first year students. They just don't do so well, and they say, well, what do I do? And then they have to switch studies, and you can't bring over those points that you already got.
So we have to start all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the general education in the States is nice because it gives you room to explore what you're actually interested in the first few years without having to hurt yourself if you change your mind with something.
Yeah, I think these 4 years are really beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I sort of noticed with this time is that you have time to study abroad, actually. I'm gonna totally recommend studying abroad. What about you?
100%.
But I think one of the nice things about German universities is that student dorms are pretty much non-existent. Or?
They exist, but yeah, you don't really live with them. I don't know, for me I think it's nice to live in a dorm though. Your first year at university, like in the States, I was excited about it because then you meet all of your fellow students, and I think it really creates this cohesive community at the university.
That is true.
And I think German universities don't really have this whole community campus feeling the way we do in the States, and I think that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
The way it is in the States, that is.
Yeah, the way in the States is a lot different.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I think back to my home university there, and you have this circular campus, and you have the student dorms on the outside of the campus, and so everybody has to go from point A to point B, and you have to cross through the middle somehow or along the circle, and it really creates this necessity to go and interact with each other. Whereas here, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday evening, and everybody's gone.
There's no one on campus.
There's nobody on
It's
campus.
dead.
It's dead. You're like, well, that's kind of weird.
Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you learned a little bit about what it's like at an American university and what it's like at a German one and the differences.
Yeah, I hope you had a good time. I hope
Yeah.
you learned something new.
Yeah, thanks for chatting with me, Tyler.
Why, thank you very much, Jessie. It's been great.